Welcome to TRS Clips, India's fastest learning portal. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you hit that bell icon. Let's just do a very quick kind of storytelling recap of what happened in the Russia-Ukraine war since our last podcast, which we did at the start of the conflict. So what's happened? What do you think Putin's state of mind is now? What do you think is the future of that situation?
Right. So we had the last discussion just before the war happened. And on February 24, Russia invaded Ukraine. And everybody expected that they would steamroll Ukraine, wipe it out, flatten it. But nothing of the sort happened. They went in very systematically, very deliberately. Their vehicles were even obeying the traffic signals and all. So they were doing it in a very systematic way. They did not destroy any communication lines, any power lines, nothing like that. And they have been, it looks like they had a very clear plan of exactly what they wanted and what they did not want. So they had marched all the way up to the capital city, Kiev, and actually encircled it. And eventually they retreated from there. So it looks like it was a chess move meant to deceive the opponent as to what the real intentions are. So as of today, it's been, today is the end of May, more or less. What's happened, what the situation on the ground right now is such that they have captured at least 1/4 of Ukraine. It is now under Russian control. It is an area of land larger than Bangladesh, larger than Nepal. Ukraine is the second largest country in Europe, and 1/4 of that has been taken over by Russia. The eastern part of Ukraine and the southern part of Ukraine, more or less the coastal regions. So it looks like now that the objective was to cut off the entire coast of Ukraine, the Black Sea coast, and the eastern part, which is the Donbas region. Donbas. That seems to have been the objective of the Russian advance. Now, what is Mr. Putin thinking? What is Mr. Zelensky thinking? Zelensky is essentially nothing but a puppet. He is a puppet of NATO of the West. NATO wanted to expand into Ukraine, and it looks like they were trying to provoke some kind of reaction from Russia. Which would enable them to impose sanctions and essentially try to cripple the Russian economy, which has not kind of worked. Because if you see the strength of the Russian ruble on February 23, one day before the war, and if you see it today the Russian ruble is stronger. It is at a better position. So the Russians have been able to not only stop the bleeding, but reverse it and make their currency stronger because they have the trump card, they have the aces, the oil and gas supplies to Europe. The whole of Europe is essentially dependent on Russian gas. And the Russians have said, you want to buy our gas, you have to pay in rubles, which means there's a demand for the currency, which means its price goes up.
Wow.
So that's what they've done. So that
was definitely an angle for even starting the conflict in the first place. One of the angles?
I think it is something they had foreseen.
Okay.
I think this war, this invasion has been in the planning for at least 5 to 10 years. Because we know what happened in 2014 when the Russians annexed the Crimean Peninsula. So all of that, I think, was a long-term game plan. It is territory that was traditionally Russian territory. If you see the history, it's always been that way. And because of the circumstances that led to the disintegration of the USSR, all of these territories were taken away from Russia. So now they are taking it back. So it looks like they want to take out 1/4 of Ukraine, eastern region, and the entire coastal region up to Odessa in slightly towards the west. So that seems to be the game plan. They are also coordinating with China because China and the US have this big friction. So the Chinese and the Russians are coordinating. I would not call it a long-term alliance. It's an alliance of convenience because Russia and China are also actually adversaries. If you look at the geography, it is inevitable that there will be adversaries. As China rises, Russia will feel threatened. And as of today, there are Russian ballistic missiles aimed at China. Yeah, so it's there, and vice versa. So that's how it goes. You know, in geopolitics, there are no real adversaries or allies. It's like dance partners. When you dance with a person, the way you dance is gonna be, it will depend on your physical characteristics and your partner's physical characteristics. If you do the tango, the foxtrot, or the salsa, or whatever, if you're large, your partner is small, you're gonna dance in a certain way. If your partner is larger than you and you're smaller or weaker, you're gonna dance in a different way. So it's all about the dance. It's not about enmity or alliance, it's about the dance. So right now we are witnessing a certain kind of dance between Russia, China, and NATO. NATO is a stand-in for the US. One thing people don't realize is that the largest power in Europe, apart from Russia, is the US. It's not Germany, it's not France. These are all subsidiary states of the US.
Mm.
The US is what drives NATO and the EU. So none of the countries in Western Europe has an independent foreign policy except for France. And there's a lot of friction between France and the US.
Okay.
So there's all of this dynamics at play right now. And so that's where we are vis-a-vis the Ukraine situation.
What is the friction between France and the US?
Well, the US, see, it's like this. At the end of World War II, the US and the USSR were the victorious powers in Europe. Most of the fighting was done by the USSR and most of the bleeding was done by the USSR. But the Americans, and as soon as the World War II got over, there was this Cold War that came into place because the US realized that Russia is very powerful and they wanted to dominate Europe. So then that's where the Iron Curtain came into place and Europe was split into two branches. One was the Eastern Bloc, which is the USSR bloc, and the rest was the American bloc. Now, the Americans have a permanent military presence in several European countries. Germany has been under permanent US occupation since 1945. People don't realize it. So Germany is not truly a free country. It's a country under foreign occupation. And similarly, and the UK also is a US vassal state, more or less. It's only France that has maintained some kind of strategic autonomy over the years because of the policies they pursued.
Okay, a little hard-hitting question.
Yeah.
Is this economic imperialism?
It is geopolitical, geoeconomic, geostrategic imperialism.
Okay.
The US, we consider it to be a superpower. That's the nice term to use. It's actually an empire.
Yeah, 100%.
Superpower is a euphemism for empire. Let's understand what really happened. In the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, the UK was the British Empire, which encompassed much of the globe. Now, in the 1920s, 30s, etc., the UK was waning. The British Empire was declining. It was in gradual decline. And after World War II, what happened is that the empire continued, but the headquarters moved westwards from London, UK to Washington, DC. It's the Anglo-Saxon Empire. It's the same entity. All of the structures are still in place, but now it's dominated from Washington, DC.
And the Illuminati.
Maybe.
That's a whole other conversation.
That's a whole different thing, yeah.